Hello, North from North Sounds here. Step sequencing. What is it? What can you do with it? And how do you set it up? That's what we'll be taking care of today. So the step sequencer is a modulation source, and you can find it in any EXI engine. So in this case, we've got an AL1 engine. We've got the step sequencer right here. So that's the common step sequencer. And there is the native step sequencer to the AL1 engine. Now, the common step sequencer exists in all of the EXI engines, and the step sequencer within the engine itself can be found in AL1 and Mod 7. It doesn't exist on the HD1 engine because you can use wave sequencing for the HD1 or the sample playback engine, and that's a completely different thing. What does it actually do? So it's a modulation source. A modulation source, no different from the different sliders and switches and knobs and pedals that you may have to control pretty much any aspect of the Kronos for as long as it's got the AMS feature. So the most common thing that you use the step sequencer for is to modify pitch, which means you can create different melodies just by playing one note because it actually goes through different steps. So you can think of the step sequencer as having 32 different switches that you can turn on and off or assign different values to and assign different durations to. Okay, and you can loop it and do all sorts of stuff with it. So in this case, Dancing on the Ceiling, if I play the E, I'm modulating pitch with a step sequencer. So in this case, it's the native step sequencer right there. And you can also modify filters. So earlier I played Crazy by Seal, and there's this rhythmic thing, and that is modulating filter or the brightness of the sound. And it also goes through different effects, and the other examples as well showed how that works. Now, how do we set it up? Well, first thing you have to do is determine what you want to be affected by the step sequencer. So in this case, I'm creating a melody using that. And when you're talking about melody, you're talking about modulating pitch or changing the pitch. Okay, so now I've got an initialized program. This is an AL1 program. And I want to create a melody when I play a single note. And here it is, the step sequencer right there, and the common step sequencer. In this case, it's an AL1. I'm going to use this step sequencer. Now, when you play the AL1, let's go in there. So I'm just going to touch that. It takes me to the oscillator basic page. Okay. Now, I want to go to the mixer. And as you can see, there's oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 within AL1. That means there's two sources of sound. And I will turn off oscillator 2 for the meantime, just for the sake of this demo, to make it simpler. Okay, so this is the only oscillator that you hear. So there's oscillator 1, oscillator 2. If I go to the mixer, I've turned off oscillator 2, put it to 0, and I've got oscillator 1. Now I'll go to pitch envelope generator and mod. Okay, so that's the last tab right here. And this is what I want to focus on because I want to put a melody in a single note. I want to modulate the pitch of oscillator 1. Now, if I had oscillator 2 turned on, this is what I will be looking at as well. But for the meantime, this is the only one we want to look at. Now, AMS, it says, so AMS 1. So AMS stands for assignable modulation source. That means you can modulate pitch by using any of these different controllers. So you can control the pitch using your pedal, your LFO. You can use velocity, note number, aftertouch, and there it is, step sequencer. So this is the step sequencer that's native to AL1 right there, step sequencer. So I usually put intensity number 24, okay? So now we've set this up. We want the step sequencer to affect the pitch of oscillator 1 by 24, okay? And now I'm going to go to the step sequencer right here. So this is the step sequencer right there. And this is the page. These are the controls for your step sequencer. So one way of thinking about the step sequencer is it's like having 32 switches that you can turn on and off, and you can determine the value or the intensity of its effect. And you can also determine what the duration is per switch or per step. And there's a few modes. There's a loop mode and there's one-shot mode. So by default, it is in loop mode. And by default, it's in 16 steps. So I'm just going to program in a very simple melody. So start step 1, and I'm going to end step maybe 4 or 5, maybe 4, okay? 4. So earlier, when I had that at 16, you could see that there's a blue bar on the side. And if I go scroll down, it goes up to 16. That means these are the active steps within the step sequencer. So I've already nominated the step sequencer as the pitch modulator, and if I play a note, nothing's happening, okay? So it's pretty much normal. And that's because I haven't done anything with the values yet. Okay, so we set the intensity at 24 earlier, and if I set step 1 to 0, if it just leave it on 0, whatever note you're playing remains that note. So if you play a C, you'll hear a C because it's at 0. It's not affecting it. Now, if I put the value at 8, I will now hear a D when I play the C. Okay? So I held it down for just a short time, and you're hearing a D instead of a C when I play the C note. And if I go 16, I'll be playing an E instead of a C. Okay. Now, if I hold on to that note longer, it will come from this step, from numbers, I've got 16 in there, and it'll move on to the different steps down the step sequencer. So so the start step right now is step 1, and I'm going to put that to step 2. Okay, step 2. So now I have 1 and 2. And what's going to happen is it's going to go from step 1, step 2, and it's just going to loop from one to the other. So you're going to hear E, C, E, C as the notes, okay? So mi and do, okay? Okay, sort of like a siren, okay? Because a whole step is 8, and I guess a half step is 4. Based on the 24 intensity. So okay, now I'm going to put the end step to 4, and you notice that bar is now covering 4, and I've got 16 there, and then I'll put 8, and then I'll leave that at 0. So when I play this, you'll hear E, C, and D. Okay, and then on step 4, I'll put 8, and then I'll move this a step further. Maybe I'll go 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then on this one, I'll put 16. So, and then I'll put another 16 and another 16. And there you go. So now it's playing a melody because I've changed the values. Now, I can also change the duration right here. Okay, so by default, they're set to quarter notes, and they're quarter notes of this tempo based on the 120 beats per minute tempo, quarter notes based on that. And I can change the duration. I can lengthen it by doubling it, so times 2. These become half notes now. Or I can halve it by 2, or I can divide it by 2, and this will become 8th notes. I can divide that again. So that's how I did the Dancing with the Ceiling ARP. It was using pitch modulation and just assigning the notes. and you know that each note value is equivalent to 8, and a semitone is equivalent to 4. So you can just figure out the length of the actual ARP, make it loop, and assign the values there. And of course, you want to save that that program so that you can use it for your combi later on. So that's how you modulate pitch using the step sequencer. Now, what if I want to modulate filter? Pretty much the same thing. Right now, this is just an initial patch, but I will play around with the filter. So that's pretty buzzy. So I'm gonna turn down the frequency of this filter. So we have the AL1. This is the filter. I can go through EXI filter. Sometimes the shortcut is just touching the screen on the first page. So that's the filter right there. And it takes you to the filter page. And I'll put filter to 0, where you won't hear any note. Okay, it's very soft. And again, I will go to the basic setting of the AL1 program. Go to the mixer and turn off oscillator 2, so it's easier to manage. Okay, oscillator 2 has been turned off, and we just have oscillator 1. And now I'm going to go to filter modulation. So earlier we changed pitch and we created melodies, and we went to pitch modulations. So if you want to alter the brightness of the sound, you alter the filter. Okay, the filter allows frequencies to prevents frequencies from coming through. It's a filter. Okay, it filters out unwanted frequencies. So filter modulation is where we go. And there it is, filter A modulation is the parameter that you want to see. And just like we did earlier, we choose step sequencer as the AMS, the assignable modulation source. So we nominate the modulation source, and it's the step sequencer. And we can pretty much put any value you want. So let's go 99. So at the moment, it's very, very soft. You can barely hear this note that I'm playing, or if at all. But now I'm going to go to step sequencer, and I'll create this rhythmic thing. So I'll go all the way to 100, and then we'll go 0 on that one, and then 100 on that one, and then maybe 25, and then 50, and then 75, then 100, and then 0, 100, and make that the length of the step sequence go up to 9. Okay, and now if I play a note, see what happens. You now have this rhythmic thing going on that's affecting filter. And again, I'll have the values of that. I'll divide it by 2. And go further, and I'll go further than that. And there you go. I'm now affecting the filter. Okay, and I can have a bit of fun with that one. Now there's some other parameters right here. What if you want to smooth that, make that smooth transition between the steps? So there's a smoothing parameter. You can change the attack value of the step and the decay value. Instead of having a choppy rhythm, it's smoother. Okay, not very smooth. There you go. So now it's a bit smoother. So it's now not as distinct as what we did earlier. Now within the step sequencer, you can also have assignable modulation sources. So the intensity, or you can jump to different steps by using an AMS, so an assignable modulation source. So for instance, if you want to use a pedal and jump from the first step to step 5, you can go 5 steps and use the pedal to control that. Okay, so it could be a foot pedal, or it could be after touch. There's your foot pedal right there, and you can use the foot pedal, and it will skip the steps and jump to there, step 5. Okay, you can reset the sequence by putting in a value here, and there's this other parameter. It's called AMS input. So you can determine how much the values are here in real time. Okay, so if you go beyond 100, I'm going to turn the knob. You can go random, or you can go AMS input. And say, for instance, in real time, I want step 1 and step 3 to be controlled by my pedal. I just choose foot pedal in there, and step 1 and step 3 can be controlled in real time while the others are fixed. Okay, so okay, that's how you route the step sequencer to your filter. Pretty easy. So anything essentially that has the AMS feature can be controlled by the step sequencer for as long as it's available there. Okay, what about volume? How do we change volume? Volume, the same thing. We go to amp modulation. So you notice that if I wanted to affect pitch, I go to pitch modulation. If I want to affect filter, I go to filter modulation. If I want to affect volume, I go to amp modulation. So pretty much the same thing. Amp modulation, AMS, I can go to step sequencer, intensity 99. So right now it's affecting both the filter and the volume of the sound that I'm playing. If I want to use a step sequencer for other EXI engines, such as the piano or the EP or the Poly6 and the MS-20, I'll be using the common step sequencer. But if you want to maximize the step sequencer functionality, the AL1 is what I would normally recommend you use. And there you go. That's how you modify the sounds using the step sequencer on the Kronos. So I hope you enjoyed that video. This is Narf from Narf Sounds. Please visit my website, narfsounds.com. Subscribe and like this YouTube channel. Also, if you own a Kronos, you're certainly welcome to join us on Facebook. The group is called the Kronos Enthusiast Workshops. There's a lot of videos in there, lots of resources, and a pretty cool community of Kronos users. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy that. Bye.